Base is dropped for another go-round of soccer down here in the afternoon. John here at the Dungeon in Gainesville, Georgia, as Jason and I are getting ready in short order to get ready for Johnson, Gainesville, and El Clasico. Jarrett there. And Niko Moreno is there. It is another go-round of Thursdays with Niko on a Friday. And Niko, it is a three-way dance as Jarrett Smith has joined us this week.
I love it. Can you hear me okay?
You're good, bud.
Yes, we can.
Too.
All right, guys. We're just excited to be on. Lots to talk about. We could hit it many ways, many regions. I'm just here, so you guys tell me where we go.
All right. So first off, let's deal with a little heartbreak. And what happened in Morocco, in Tangier, everything was looking good. And then a shot, a deflection, a 1-0 loss in the Club World Cup. What's the vibe been like since the loss? And now that everybody's back, you've seen some practice. What are some of the takeaways from the Club World Cup from a Seattle perspective?
I mean, it's been a big roller coaster, right? I mean, in one hand, you have an absolute failure and an ability to get a win in a very winnable game, regardless of the lack of rhythm, the lack of preseason games, the condensed preseason, and the fact that the team was playing probably their second 90 in general, 90 minutes since October. They had every chance to win this game. They dominated big parts, big lapses of this game. They did not allow Al Ali to do any sort of real dangerous approaches on goal for the first, 60 minutes or so. So there is some frustration that it was there for you to grab it and you didn't do that. There were mistakes along the lines. I thought Brian Smetzer was great and courageous, just taking advantage. I mean, taking accountability for what happened there. He said it, would an extra game in the preseason had made a difference to knock some rust off? Yeah, probably. I asked him if his approach to the game was that too passive, and he said, yeah, maybe some of the substitutions could have been done differently, but it's something that he's taken, and I really like that. Whenever you got a guy that is willing to admit his mistakes, you're showing me a guy that's willing to learn and grow from that. In terms of the players, clearly some good performances. I thought the back line was fantastic. In general, Niko had a decent game. Rusnak was really bad, to be quite frank. Raul wasn't getting a lot of services in. But at the end of the day, you do lose the game on a shot that I'm not really sure if it would have gone on goal. It just kind of gets deflected in. But that's the way soccer happens. And if you don't take advantage, if you're not clinical in front of goal, then you're allowing the other team to stay in the game. And boom, it's over in 1 second.
Jarrett Smith for Niko Moreno.
Yeah, and John, I'm glad you started here because let's get the rough stuff out of the way first. Because it's a team that after the Seattle game, goes into the next round and gives Madrid basically all they can handle for like 70 minutes and then some. And it certainly, I know a lot of people don't like moral victories, but to your point, and some of this reminded me of like some of the ups and downs that Atlanta had of a team that was comfortable on the ball, looked good, couldn't find the killing blow, and then lost it late. And, maybe to Smetzer's point, maybe another 90 does it in preseason where you're not just physically sharper, but mentally sharper. It seemed like they started to fade late, which is totally understandable. You're playing in tough conditions against a team that's already in a rhythm. But I hope that, all the memes and jokes that have flown aside, I hope that Seattle, takes it with pride that, coming through preseason, were able to go. I thought they acquitted themselves really well aside from the finishing, and something they can build on and take into the regular season.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of that ride, that emotional roller coaster, because all soccer aside as well, the globalization of Sounders was really there. I mean, talking to the players and watching knockoff jerseys, walking throughout Morocco, walking throughout Spain. Brian Smesser mentioned that he was recognized 4 or 5 times, which is something that you don't really think about when you're not in the States or you're not in Seattle. I don't know how many people will recognize Brian
I'll
in,
say
I don't know,
that's amazing.
Ohio.
He's such a
So
nondescript human being. Like,
what?
no knock on it. That's amazing because he's just such a nondescript looking guy. He just looks like a normal guy.
Yeah,
If you told me like Brian Spencer's walking down the street in Seattle, I'm like, oh, that guy's a C level for some corporation downtown, right? Oh no, that's oh, okay, cool. That's
absolutely. And the
awesome that
global
he was
components
recognized.
there, unfortunately, you're always going to hear, that was the one chance for MLS. And, that's kind of what MLS is about. Now, that they're not at league play, but those are just things that go on and off. And they're from people who don't really have better knowledge. It's quite an ignorant comment, to be quite frank. It was a 90-minute game that it could have gone either way. And that's kind of what happened. And you kind of saw this same team uh, give Real Madrid, I mean, it was a good effort. I mean, it was 2-1 for like, what, 70 minutes or something like that. Then they get the soft penalty and Modric misses it. So, I mean, they're a team that held on. So that's kind of what I'm trying to get to, right? This was not a extremely easy team to play with, and is it a tournament that you've never been at before, and still you were able to provide a good performance in lapses, and you just don't get that final result. But you got to take it for what it is, learn from it, and now focus on MLS play, US Open Cup, and Leagues Cup.
All right, a bit of breaking news here, and this is where sometimes the show, because it's in the afternoon, it kind of goes off the rails a little bit. Liga MX. Miguel Herrera is the new head coach at Xolos.
Wow.
Miguel,
My friend Piojo.
He is back at Xolos. What do you think about that one?
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, it was kind of, he was just waiting for the whole Diego Coca thing to happen. He did have ambition to take on that El Tri national team, and he thought that he could actually win it. And now that that's aside, and I'm sure he didn't find out today, obviously, but throughout the week, I'm sure that he was planning on figuring out his next move. Now he goes to a Xolos team that, honestly, at this time, it's hard to think of him like a contender, but he has that grit, he has that understanding, he has those connections to bring in players. So it's an interesting move for a guy who I have nothing but good words to talk about, and someone who I think it's very qualified to manage this Cholos team.
4 points in their first 5 matches, Jarrett, here in the Clausura. Piojo returns.
Oh man, those of us that were thinking him for the Mexico team, we are just distraught on the gambling side of things. Oh damn. To shift gears, if I can, from sad things to kind of sentimental things, we get the word that one of the mainstays out where you are, Will Bruin, going to Austin. I wanted to get your thoughts on that because he felt like such a reliable piece for that Sounders squad. It feels like forever he's been there.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. When I put that breaking news that he had signed yesterday, it's interesting how many people go out of their way to minimize his impact and go to the stats and say 3 goals here, 4 goals there. Like, what are you talking about? They don't see the day-to-day. They don't understand how reliable he can be coming off the bench and all that target man work that he does, the hold-up play. And in training, man, ask these guys out here. Ask Raul. Ask Niko. Ask the forwards that go the center backs that go against his forwards constantly, like Yamar and Javi, and they'll tell you, if there's one guy that I hate to be paired up against, is Will, because he's not gonna take the day off. He's not gonna take a drill off. He's gonna be giving you 110% every single time he gets in there, and he might body you. He might give you a little shoulder because that's just the way he plays the game. He enjoys it. He loves being part of a team. He has all of the possible intangibles that you can think of that are positive for a player. He has them. So I think people just sometimes are very short-sighted on the impact the player can have at 33 years old, and being an experienced person and someone who is not going to be obviously a starter. Someone was like, well, DeRussi has those same goals in a couple of years. We're talking about two different players here. I'm not talking that Will Brewer is going to be, this lights out player. He's a depth component for a team that has a lot of competitions, and you can't not undermine good, positive quality depth.
So then who for Seattle in your mind takes over the role that Will has created, the elder statesman, the guy that'll put his arm around the younger players to coach them through in these situations? Who takes over to be that veteran glue guy, for lack of a better word? And yes, I did use air quotes for those listening later. And yes, it's $1 fine in the jar for doing air quotes and using glue guy. But who is that senior veteran presence now that takes over that Will Bruin role to help out the younger players and to help out Brian Schmetzer coming off the bench this year in 23?
I think it's got to be Freddie Montero. I mean, talking about that specific component, right? I think Hebert has shown us in practice and has shown us just in general through drills and things that he could definitely be a quality depth piece, and that he could even be a step up in soccer terms from what Will Brewing could provide you with at this time in his career. But that leadership component, yeah, I don't think anybody other than maybe Freddie. Niko is someone who constantly does it. He actually does a very good job with all the younger players, making sure that they're seeing the game differently. Just yesterday, and I think I have a video of him actually talking to Hebert and just kind of saying, hey, this is where I want you to be. So he's that guy that's going to be your leadership guy. He's going to be that one that's going to be keeping the team accountable and holding everybody to a certain standard. So he's just going to have to double up, because Will was that guy that would do a lot of those things. But now someone like Niko's going to have to double up on that.
And going into the structure of the team a bit, because this is something we talk about in Atlanta a lot with the kids coming up from the twos, of guys who can jump into that structure and not necessarily be leaders, but guys who can learn from it and then start to make the jumps. We saw some of the youth last year in Seattle as they were trying to, at times felt like they were trying to survive Champions League. At times they were thriving. At times they're just trying to survive the league so they could thrive in Champions League. Who are some of the young guys we should be keeping an eye on who are, part of that culture that we could be seeing if we turn on a game this year and turn on a MLS After Dark? And Brian Schmetzer has never been afraid to throw those guys in there if they're in a position to succeed. Who should we be watching for?
I always have my eye on Danny Leyva, and I know that he had some complaints. He was part of the breakaway that kind of led to that World Cup goal. But I think he's a guy that is relentless, that he is a student of the game, and that he's gotten better every time. But to go for someone that I haven't mentioned in this show yet, I think Baker is a guy that is going to be a handful. Watching him this preseason and watching him just yesterday, there was a play where is a ball into space and Javier Arriaga has the positioning to kind of block him out of the way, and he completely gets by him with a little move off the ball and gets behind him to the point that the veteran can do nothing but take him out from the back. So I think he's a guy that has a lot of quality that will be probably in a row of an attacking midfielder at some point. He could also play, at fullback, so he could do some of that. But he's a very interesting guy. I also like Tevez. He's someone who I think needs to bulk up a little bit. He gets bounced off the ball pretty quickly, but he also has a lot of good qualities. He's a guy from UW that I think sees the game very well, and he's nifty on the ball, and he's just maybe a couple of pounds and a couple of years from really becoming an important player. So yeah, those are a couple of the guys that kind of come to mind.
Niko, when you look at everything else that has transpired in the last week, I guess from a headlines perspective, what else has stuck with you outside of Club World Cup in Seattle? What else in Major League Soccer has stuck with you in the last week, whether it's somebody moving? Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang could be taking the Gareth Bale approach at LAFC. Kevin Baxter writes a column about LAG and basically says they're now a laughing stock because of everything that has happened with them in the last couple of years on the field and off. He goes into Chris Klein. What stuff is stuck with you in Major League Soccer and in the Western Conference in the last week?
Well, to go with more recent news and to touch on something that you probably might have gone over in recent days with LAFC, we'll go with San Jose. I thought Jonathan Mensah going to that team is a big get for the price tag, for a team that I think he's got some cohesive pieces there. I think Cal is going to have a breakout year. I'm interested to see what Trauco does. He's a player that, when healthy, could be a real game changer. Ibobosi, can he continue to play as great as he has and really build maybe a little bit higher than that? So yeah, I think San Jose is one that's making you look, because of the Luchi Gonzalez component, gives you maybe a little bit more trust that team's going to be better structured, is going to be more ready in a game-to-game basis. So that's really caught my attention because sometimes when you make some of those small moves and you start to really put a team together, you can give yourself a chance to really surprise some people. But in terms of LAFC, man, I mean, man, they're really moving the rules around a little bit, making it uncomfortable around the league. And I'm not huge on it. I don't think he's going to come in and be lights out amazing. I think he's going to be a really good player. But what makes it such a good move is that he comes in free for a year. So you kind of give in a league that is so restricted, and you need to maximize, and we talk about this all the time, maximize your resources to make your team better. Man, that would be pretty good move.
And also for a team at LAFC that was just so damn dead set on moving an amazing goal scorer in Arango and moving him down to Mexico. I was fascinated to see how they would do this, because it felt like for the last two windows, hell or high water, they were going to move him. And for the longest time, it didn't make sense. I guess they didn't want to pay him, a DP deal, but I don't know. I'm still a little skeptical on it, because I don't know what you're getting. I don't know what you're getting out of Carlos Vela at this point. Carlos Vela has put together an outstanding stint in MLS, one of the most impressive runs we have ever seen over a short period of time. I don't know if he can be that guy. If Aubameyang doesn't come in and isn't able to be that guy, there were the Albert Elise rumors, which, oh God, that would have been amazing. But who's going to be there to kind of drag them out of the fire?
Yeah, I'm with you. I still think that they're going to miss Chicho Arango. They really will. That the type of 9 that he was, you don't have in that roster right now. And the things that he did off the ball and those movements and that definite goal scoring ability, I don't think anyone in the roster has it. So it's going to be interesting how that plays out. I think he's going to do fantastic in Liga MX, and he's probably going to have a chip on his shoulder come along Leagues Cup. So that'll be interesting to watch. But I really think that LAFC is doing a rebuild when it's not necessary. But this is LAFC. I doubted them last year when they were doing all kinds of ridiculous moves, and they ended up winning the championship. So what do I know?
Well, but I think that at the same time, we have those franchises that, for whatever reason, they want to tinker because they can. It's like they're not happy being successful. So to be even more successful, we've got to tinker even more. We've got to sit there. We've got to mess with what we've got. And you see it sometimes with teams that are really successful. You sit there and it's like, well, I think that maybe if we do this and we just kind of tweak it a little bit, then maybe we'll be that much more successful. I mean, driven folks are in those mindsets occasionally. And I think that LAFC and John Thorrington, yeah, they kind of do it because they can. But I just still think that below the surface, there's this there's this itch of uncertainty or whatever you want to call it, where LAFC is concerned, maybe that because they're not liked by the cool kids in school, the insecurity is there, so they feel like they have to keep changing things.
Yeah, because they go for all these blockbuster moves that, I mean, are not really necessary. I get it. I understand that Gareth Bale was worth everything with that one goal, but I mean, at the end of the day, that's still an iffy move. The Giorgio Cellino stuff, Cellini. Now this, I mean, it's honestly something that it feels like LA wants to give you that LA glow, those lights, those that Hollywood vibe, and I guess they get it here, bringing a guy like that. But I honestly don't. He's been very inconsistent as well. I don't think he's gonna come in here and he is at the prime of his career, just completely taking it over. I just don't see that, and I think that there is a learning curve to the league, to a team, to a guy like Cherundolo. How is he going to deal with someone like this? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that people are not quite looking at, and I still think Sifu's going to leave in the summer window, and so how are you going to replace that in a team that you're already looking very thin when it comes to midfielders? So I guess we'll wait and see, because when I look at this roster, I don't see a repeat. I don't. I mean, right now, I think the best two teams on paper are the Philadelphia Union and Orlando City when it comes to potential. I don't have a LAFC there.
Yeah, so the second one you mentioned is kind of a no-no in a lot of circles here in Atlanta, just because of that rivalry sense. But I think you're 100% correct too, though. Like, I know Philadelphia is on a revenge tour. Orlando just kind of rolled out there and had one of the best off seasons on paper that I think I've seen in a while. Like, it feel and we've had our questions, and I've had my questions about Oscar Pereira, about how pragmatic he gets sometimes as a season goes on, where he comes out like a chariot on fire and really just kind of seems to crawl into a shell as things go on. But it feels like he's loading up the arsenal where it might not matter as much.
Yeah, I mean, he's gearing up with a bunch of talent, a bunch of depth, and a bunch of options that could play in so many ways. He could surprise everybody and come out with a 3-man backline this year and really push with some wing backs. Maybe Angulo plays there, and you get a guy like Ojeda that was a superstar with Godoy Cruz out there right next to Facundo Torres, and you got a guy like Carrop how to get more service. He could just go with the same 4-2-3-1 that he played last year. You hope that his center back situation stays healthy, because that's one question mark. This is both older guys that are coming from injuries, but if they can stay healthy, man, this is a very, very good team. I think Facundo will stay here for the year at least, kind of rack up that value to go up, and eventually get pass him on, move him on to Europe or whatever you're going to sell him. But this squad, in terms of potential, raw potential, man, they're up there.
And Tommy Scoops came up with a story this afternoon, and it appears that big news out of NYC. It looks like Cesar Luis Merlo is reporting NYCFC have agreed on a permanent deal to keep Santi Rodriguez from City Torque. And we talked about NYC losing all of the big names, trying to figure out how to fill these holes, knowing that the academy was going to have to be a part of this and the younger players were going to have to step up. It looks like, if Cesar Luis Merlo's reporting is spot on, that you have that Maxi Morales replacement, hashtag whatever, that's another $1 in the jar for me. But it looks like Santi Rodriguez might be staying at NYC to help them out in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I have insight on this. And Merlo definitely has a lot more sources than I do, and I respect his work. I do know that there's nothing done. There's nothing signed. There might be a pre-agreement or a verbal agreement of some of the parties that are involved in this whole deal, because there are quite a few. But at the end of the day, nothing's been signed. That said, I think Santiago Rodriguez is a guy that he's got such a quality, such a high ceiling. I would absolutely keep him for the New York City FC team that needs a little bit of continuity and could have a guy that could display so many roles, so many assignments, can play so many different positions. And he's a finisher, man. He really is. The way he sees the game, the way he connects, that final third is immaculate. He honestly is one of those guys that I've been watching for a very long time. But we'll see, right? We heard the Bahia rumors. They said he was completely signed, ready to go. They were going to present him the next day. That was not true. Obviously, he went down to Torque because that's where he's at. That's where his rights are at. So he's going to be playing there. But it was just a temporary setup. So now with this whole New York City FC, yes, there's definitely an ongoing conversation. Negotiations are finalizing, but at this time, there's nothing done. But I would definitely think he's a player that would help this New York City FC team have more of a baseline and higher floor than I see it at this time.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because that's a team that you talk about continuity that, you know, we've talked about MLS Cup teams just kind of not being able to keep it together because of the structure of MLS. But man, New York City seems like they speed ran this thing, you know, kind of deconstructing that team entirely and having to move guys on. You know, looking at that team, I mean, what do you like 30,000-foot view? What are you expecting out of that team this year?
I think they're going to struggle. And I think that even if they go out there and get quality players with all their resources and everything that they have in terms of data and reach and player and everything that they are able to have at their disposition, I really think they're going to struggle. Not having a core group, not having that, you know, column of players that really put you at an advantage of understanding anything that the coaches are trying to put out on the field can be very detrimental to a team. I think that the goalkeeping situation is very iffy. I think that back line is going to struggle. They absolutely were a different team when Alexander Cayens was not out there. So that's going to be a huge component. Not having a creative mind and someone that could really rally your team like Maxi. I just don't see this team having the ability to take on a couple of goals or take on some adversity early in the year and be able to turn it around because it's such a new team. So I just think they're going to struggle. Obviously, they're a team that are always going to be playoff contenders, but I just don't see them as top of the East. I don't.
And another piece of breaking news before we go, Minnesota United has just released a statement. Emmanuel Reynoso has been suspended without pay by Major League Soccer for failure to report to preseason training. We have no additional information beyond that at this time. So 2 sentences on Emmanuel Reynoso. Minnesota United, they've been waiting. It was supposed to be weeks. Now it's been months. There have been questions. Andy Greeter did some work in the St. Paul Pioneer Press this past week where he talked to players, Robin Lud, and got some quotes from, Adrian Heath. But it looks like now Emmanuel Reynoso suspended without pay by Major League Soccer.
Yeah, I saw it coming. It was something that I didn't quite get into because there's plenty of information out there, and it's unfortunate. But this is a guy that has prior records in Argentina, and if you're not familiarized with how slow cases happen in third world countries, it could be years before anything gets done with this. And because there's a pending case, he obviously can't leave Cordoba, I believe is where he's at. So therefore he can't come and he can start preseason. He can't do anything. So I think those legal attachments are going to keep him out for a very long time. And he's probably going to be let go of his contract at some point. And then he could sign with another team unless Minnesota feels like there's a light at the end of the tunnel and they're able to keep him. But I really don't see this coming to a conclusion this year. I'm not kidding you.
And we'll keep an eye on it as we go forward. What's going on with Soccer Bar and Pulso Sports, Niko, that folks need to keep an eye on?
Oh, well, we just had a really good conversation with Yemer Gomez Andrade after the Club World Cup. I also asked him about the Colombian national team, his desire to be part of that squad. I continually say that he's one of the best defenders in the league. And with some of the changes and rotations that have happened with the new coach in Colombia, I think he's definitely one that will get another call up. He was already called up under Hernando Rueda. So talk to him a little bit about that. You can check it out in probably a couple of hours in our YouTube channel. Soccer Bar next Monday. We'll be breaking down a lot of this Western Conference, a lot of these moves, talking Luchi Gonzalez, talking some of this Mensa situation, and giving you everything that you can possibly want in Spanish in MLS content.
What he said. So once again, it's another great round of Thursdays with Niko at El Rolo NW, at The Soccer Bar, and at Sports Pulso on the Twitters. Jarrett, send us home on a Friday.
Mucho plata, y'all. Mucho plata.
What he said. Johnson, Gainesville. It is an El Clasico. Starts at 5:30 on the network, on your app. Girls at 5:30, boys at 7:30. We'll see you in 28 minutes. Enjoy.